Great, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk today. Today I represent Dow Chemical and actually the newly formed Dow DuPont. We're a company that manufactures all sorts of materials that make the things that you buy. Not necessarily what you buy, the things that enable those. We sell about 70 billion worth of products globally. We have plants around the globe and throughout the U.S. Kind of my role at Dow is I'm a hired consultant internally for solving, at least initially, wastewater problems, and then starting in 2002, water security issues at facilities that we operate around the globe. And so I've been involved in at least a dozen different water supply initiatives at places like, the deserts out in China, Argentina, Saudi Arabia. It's been a great experience to really see how different cultures around the world kind of address water issues and really kind of the global challenges in that space. A little bit about the products we make. I mentioned plastics, electrical materials. We do sell UFRO, ion exchange membrane, and resin materials that help make water better, kind of competing with GE, safe to say. But today I'd really like to talk about kind of industrial reliability, water infrastructure, and really the importance of proactive water infrastructure investment. I'd ask you today, how many of you guys came to this meeting by going down a gravel road? I would venture to bet nobody. Maybe John did. I think he came from Ecuador, so I think he hit a gravel road on the way here. But generally we're not driving on gravel roads, and part of the reason why that is improved roads and highways have infrastructure efficiency. We move things around faster, we get there more productively when the means to get there is reliable. Same is true around water. I mean, we turn the tap on and our expectation is that there's water there. But actually globally that's not the case. And even here in the US, it's getting to be more and more problematic, particularly in the western states. And really kind of the cutting edge of that is agricultural users. They're often the first to kind of get cut off when there's not enough water. The second in line for that is industry. When people feel stressed for water, the first challenge is, agricultural users can give it up, or there's trading programs, whatever, and they'll suffer. And we've had that happen in Texas recently. 2011, I think there was over 7 billion worth of agricultural losses in response to drought. But Dow has a big footprint in Texas, and we certainly felt that as well, where it was clear that our ability to operate was threatened. From a chemical engineering perspective, really some of the most devastating loss scenarios we consider are events that can prevent what are really capital-intensive machines from producing what they need to produce. A little bit of perspective on what we produce. We tend to take, in my particular industry, natural gas. We run it through a machine, or a hydrocarbon. We run it through a machine called a cracker. A hydrocarbon's cracker, and we basically take that material and we convert it into ethylene and propylene. And then that ethylene and propylene is then converted into all the things we use in our daily life, all the plastic things, and quite honestly, probably 1,000 different varieties of things that range from Kevlar to Mylar to the memory foam in your bed. Those machines, we just got done doing a program in Freeport where we invested $6 billion to build a cracker and 2 polyethylene plants. And so the people who invest in building that so that we can provide the services we do need those to produce. And as a society, we need those to produce. And when those are interrupted, the consequences aren't just to the company, they're to local communities. And in some of our facilities, they're big enough that the impacts can extend to regional impacts and even national impacts. Our Freeport site, where I do a lot of my work, is the largest chemical manufacturing facility in the Western Hemisphere. And I actually had a colleague from another company during the last drought speak to me and say, we're worried about our water. He, I think, was at Chevron Phillips and saying, hey, we might not be able to produce. We got less than 100 days worth of supply. And he said, but we're not like you. We're not like that facility where, if you shut it down, it ripples in the economy. And it really made me take a step back and go, okay, no, this is why infrastructure is so important. And so, we've worked a lot of things kind of on our Freeport site, and I'll talk more about that going forward. But the thing I'd really like to impress upon you is that droughts, and more recently with Harvey, floods, and even things as simple as shifts in water quality can create devastating loss for industry that ripple through communities and through our economy. And so without reliable water, existing facilities struggle to compete. And really, without water for growth, certain industries can't grow. We've been blessed really, for sure in Texas and really across North America with the availability of natural gas supplies, in the last 6 to 7 years. It's really allowed kind of a new industrial emergence, new plants to be built. Really, if you want to know why the economy, in my view, really turned around after 2008, it's because natural gas prices dropped. And that spurred investment and growth, and the economy took off. And we need to sustain that as a part of keeping a healthy economy. So today I'd like to showcase a little bit more about the importance of water infrastructure, and I'd like to highlight two aspects that make it a really unique material. First is we use a lot of it. And the second is that it's a regional supply that's governed by Mother Nature. Seems like obvious points. But really, I think the perspective on all that is still poorly understood. So I'm going to share a little more data, a couple more examples. In the U.S., we intake 350 trillion gallons worth of water a day, right? It's a hard number to wrap your head around, right? And so I was trying to think about, well, what do I compare that to? Well, I think it's like roughly 20 times the national debt, right? But a number that I can really put to it to visualize it for you is it's on an annualized basis, it's a water volume that would cover the whole state of Texas 17 foot deep, right? So if you start to think about how much water that is, it's an incredible amount of water. And it has to go from point A to point B. So you have to imagine that the infrastructure for moving that water around is an incredibly large system of channels, of buckets, which are called reservoirs, and of pipes, and of pump systems, and there's a huge amount of energy involved in getting the water that we need from one point to another. And the water that you turn on the tap, the water that farmers use, the water that industry use, all counts on that water showing up. A little bit more perspective. So there's roughly 30 oil refineries in the United States. And those oil refineries utilize roughly 5.6 million barrels of oil a day. That's roughly 320 million gallons of oil a day. That's a big number. The folks that use that really prefer to move that by pipeline. In a pinch, they'll take it by super tanker, you can move it by rail, but the costs are high, and the safety risk to move just that relatively small amount of oil around by rail or tanker or whatever, something that they really want to avoid. So by perspective, the water that we're using in the U.S. is 1 million times larger, right? So again, the whole issue around water, part of it's around technologies, and companies like GE and companies like Dow, the technologies to make water clean are incredible. And quite honestly, I could do a whole nother talk about that and how exciting that is. But the real need, one of the core needs, is we need infrastructure money just to move water from point A to point B. And that's part of why, kind of the U.S. government's focus on infrastructure and making it available is so important. All right, so talk a little bit about Mother Nature. And really a key point there is the Brazos River that I operate on, the flow can change 16-fold from one year to the next. In 1 year, there's 1 million acre-feet of water, okay, and in another year, 16 million. So kind of, I'm getting given the high sign for time, but one key thing I guess I'd really like to emphasize is this point around infrastructure, whether it's water for water security or the recent events that just happened in Houston around flooding. It's infrastructure that keeps water where we need it to be, that stores water for where we want it, or for when we need it, and that get it, to us when we need it. And so as you work with whoever you're working with, please don't underestimate the importance of just the basic funding of infrastructure. And there's great examples out there for technology, as well as great examples of how to solve these infrastructure problems through setting up borrow programs and things for entities to really be able to navigate that complex aspect of funding and the aspects of actually getting projects completed that solve our infrastructure needs. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim.